It's February 7th, 2022. Today is the anniversary of the appearance day of Sri-Advaita Acarya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda.
Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda.
Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda.
Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. I'm here with Mother Malini and Kamal Krishna and Bhakti Brielle, Bhakti Nico and Rasa Sindhu. Hare Krishna. Nice to see you. And here in line, we've got visitors from Europe, Portugal, Switzerland, Anandini, Ananta Shakti, and here from looks like Gainesville, Melrose, Alachua area, Alachua County, got Garuda, and Kim and Anasuya, Narayan, Gajendra, Bhakta Devin, and Bhakta Jim Wood. Welcome. Today is the anniversary of the appearance day of Sri Advaita Acharya. I will continue to invoke auspiciousness while we study some Chaitanya-caritamrta. This morning, before japa period, we read from some parts of the Adi-lila Chaitanya-caritamrta about kind of like the ontological position of Sri Advaita Acharya. I mentioned sometimes Prabhupada describes that Bhagavad Gita are the ABCs of spiritual life. So we start reading Adi-lila Chaitanya-caritamrta. It's not the ABCs anymore. So it gets into some intricate nuances of the different energies of Bhagavan. Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodita Godudaya Pushpanvada Chitra Sandal Tamonanda. I offer my respectful obeisances to Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, who are just like the sun and the moon. They've arisen simultaneously in the horizon of God to dissipate the darkness of ignorance in this age of Kali and to wonderfully bestow benediction upon all. Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupas Rupakam Bhaktavatam Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Jaya Tam Surtel Pangurmam Mamanda Mater Gatir Matsarasva Padambujam Radha Madana Mohana. Glory to the all-merciful Radha Madana Mohan. I am lame and ill-advised, yet they are my directors and their lotus feet are everything to me. Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpachumada Srimad Ratnagara Simasama Stau Srimad Radhashula Govinda Deval Prestali B Sivyamanao Smarami. In the temple of jewels beneath the desire tree in the forest of Vrindavan, Sri Sri Radha and Govinda, served by their most confidential associates, sit upon an effulgent throne. I offer my humble obeisances unto them. Shriman Rasa Rasarambi Bamsibata Tata Stita Karshan Venu Svener Gopir Gopidanda Shri Stunam Sri Srila Gopinath, who is the inaugurator of the transcendental mellow of the rasa dance, stands upon the shores at Vamsivat, and he attracts all the cowherd damsels of Raja with the sound of his celebrated flute. May they all confer their benedictions upon us. Om Ganatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurvanmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayamupakadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Upam Sagrajatam Saganaragnatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Scha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagat Pate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Panchakalpata Yubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. All right, so we might go into different places of Sri-Caitanya-caritamrta. We'll see where we travel. Let's start with Sri-Caitanya-caritamrta Adi-lila, Chapter 3, text 96. So Adi-lila, Chapter 3, text 96. Bhaktaniko wrote the verse on the board, the Bengali here. Chapter 3, text 96 of the Adi-lila of Sri-Caitanya-caritamrta. Prakatya Dekhe Acarya Sakala Samsara Krishna Bhakti Gandha Hina Vishaya Vyavahara Prakatya Dekhe Acharya Sakala Samsara Krishna Bhakti Gandhahina Vishaya Vyavahara Prakatya Dekhe Acharya Sakala Samsara Krishna Bhakti Gandhahina Vishaya Vyavahara Prakatya Dekhe Acharya Sakala Samsara Krishna Bhakti Gandhahina Vishaya Vyavahara
Prakatya Dekhe Acharya Sakala Samsara
Prakatya Dekhe Acharya Sakala Samsara
Krishna Bhakti Gandhahina Vishaya Vyavahara
Krishna Bhakti Gandhahina Vishaya Vyavahara
Prakatya Dekhe Acharya Sakala Samsara
Prakatya Dekhe Acharya Sakala Samsara
Krishna Bhakti Gandhahina Vishaya Vyavahara
Krishna Bhakti Gandhahina Vishaya Vyavahara
Prakatiya deke acharya sakala samsara.
Bhakatiya deke acharya sakala samsara.
Krishna bhakti gandhahina vishaya vyavahara.
Krishna bhakti gandhahina vishaya vyavahara.
Akatiya dekhe acharya shakala samsara.
Bhakatiya deke acharya sakala samsara.
Krishna bhakti gandhahina vishaya vyavhara.
Krishna bhakti gandhahina vishaya vyavahara.
Bhakatiya deki acharya sakala samsara.
Bhakatiya deke acharya sakala samsara.
Krishna bhakti gandhahina visaya vyavihara.
Krishna bhakti gandhahina vishaya vyavahara. Bhakatiya deke acharya sakala samsara. Krishna bhakti gandhahina vishaya vyavahara. Would someone online like to recite the verse?
Prakatiya Dekyacharya Sakala Samsara.
Bhakatiya deke acharya sakala samsara.
Krishna Bhakti Gandhahina Vishaya Vyavahara.
Krishna bhakti gandhahina vishaya vyavahara. Okay, we'll go to the word for word. Prakatiya,
Prakatiya
manifesting.
manifesting.
Deke,
Dekhe
he saw.
he saw.
Acharya,
Acharya.
Advaita Charya,
Advaita Charya.
Sakala,
Sakala
oh, samsara,
samsara.
material existence,
Material existence.
Krishna bhakti,
Krishna bhakti.
of devotion to Lord Krishna,
Of devotion to Lord Krishna.
Gandhahina,
Gandhahina.
without a trace,
Without a trace.
Vishaya,
Vishaya.
of the sense objects,
All the sense objects.
Vyavahara,
Yavaha.
affairs.
Affairs.
Translation. Advaita Charya, having appeared, he found the world devoid of devotional service to Sri Krishna because people were engrossed in material affairs. Okay, so one thing that comes to mind and heart, so what we can ask, why are we here? There's different dimensions to that question. Why are we here? And different answers from so many different angles. So one answer is we are here because of Sri Advaita Charya. Yeah, there's different angles we can have, but we're here from Sri Advaita. And that's it. So again, early this morning, we read about like the ontology philosophy of who Sri Advaita Charya is. And then, so there's so many aspects of Sri Advaita Charya's philosophy and pastimes. His philosophy is Achintya Veda Tattva Lord Chaitanya's philosophy in Sri-Caitanya-caritamrta. And we might go to some of the pastimes are really fun. This pastime, I'm going to call it really emotional. It's very emotional. And this is, so Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. Now it's described, arguably the main reason he appeared is to satisfy Sri Advaita Charya. Yeah, and then we can get to other reasons, and that's described. But arguably the main reason he appeared is to satisfy Sri Advaita Charya. So this particular section of Sri-Caitanya-caritamrta describes Sri Advaita Charya calling out like with tears and heartfelt feeling, because he's seeing, he found the world devoid of devotional service to Sri Krishna because people were engrossed in material affairs. So he's an acharya, means he wants to make a powerful difference for the world and the population in terms of liberating from birth and death, and even bona fide non-personal approaches, it's not going to do it. And so he's like, so Krishna, I want you to appear. Right? So Krishna is supremely great, and he's subordinate to his devotee. So Advaita Charya, not a mild request, like deep prayer. And so, okay, so for me, a theme here is gratitude. Gratitude. So just like we can say, well, yeah, we chant Hare Krishna, it's nice. And we got, Mangalarti. Oh, no, we're chanting Hare Krishna because at the age of 70, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami had, you call it a comfortable, intense spiritual bhajan life, in Vrindavan, India. And he got on the Jaladuta and suffered 2 heart attacks, and then he suffered obstacles that yeah. No, he was like taking bath in the subway in the winter of New York, and getting up at 1 a.m. to give us Chaitanya-caritamrta, right? So just like gratitude that we have this matchless gift, right? That the first center that Prabhupada opened in Manhattan, in the Lower East Side. The previous owner apparently had a shop. On the shop, it was matchless gifts. So the devotees, and they were renovating. So I said, no, keep that, Prabhupada said, keep that. It's like clearly Krishna's arrangement there. So gratitude for Prabhupada. And so today, so we appreciate and understand all the previous acharyas through our current link to the Parampara Srila Prabhupada. And on special days like this, the appearance day of Sri-Caitanya-caritamrta, it's like a special day to cultivate, it's in our direct appreciation of Sri-Caitanya-caritamrta. Of course, that's also Srila Prabhupada. We're reading these translations and purports through Srila Prabhupada. Okay. So Sri-Caitanya-caritamrta, he was suffering, he was in pain. Of course, like you mentioned Prahlad Maharaj in your class yesterday. So Prahlad Maharaj, he speaks to Lord Nrsimhadev, right? Like no one else could speak for Lord Nrsimhadev. He was just too ferocious and angry. Like even Brahma, even his consort Lakshmi, kind of like, oh, Prahlad, maybe you can talk to him. So Prahlad, sure. Prahlad, because so with Prahlad, Lord Nrsimhadev's like a lion with the cups, very sweet. So Prahlad is like, I got no problems. I'm happy, I'm blissful, I'm joyful. And I'm suffering. I'm in pain, paradukkha. That's the Vaishnava heart. Because people are suffering. Like, I don't want liberation until everyone's liberated. So this is the mood of Prabhupada's, mood of Prahlad Maharaj's, mood of the Vaishnava Acharyas, the mood of Advaita Acharya. So he said, people are suffering. And he said, like, I really see no remedy other than like Krishna appearing. So he got intense. And he prayed very simply with tulasi leaves, tulasi flowers, and Ganges water. That's what this part of Chaitanya-caritamrta described. So this particular verse, Advaita Acharya having appeared, he found the world devoid of devotional service to Sri Krishna because people were engrossed in material affairs. So he was seeing things are so degraded. So this was 540 years ago in Bengal. So if that was degraded, yeah. So what does?
Where are we coming from?
Where are we coming from? Now at the same time, so the wording here I find it interesting. He found the world devoid of devotional service to Sri Krishna because people were engrossed in material affairs. So okay, so we can say, well, compared to 540 years ago, Bengal, like things are so degraded now, like we can't even calculate. So like even more engrossed in material affairs. True, clearly. Even within our 60 years, clearly there's more degradation, like compared to those innocent times of the 1970s. I don't want to get sentimental here. 1970s were not that great, but no, things are degrading. I mean, not just my experience, that we can see the current of Kali Yuga. At the same time, at the same time, things are also elevated. Because he says he's found the world devoid of devotional service to Sri Krishna. I think we could argue, I think we could assert that there's more devotional service to Lord Krishna than like because of the representative of Sri Advaita Srila Prabhupada, that devotional service, like that transcendental process of bhakti, it's likely more widespread than it was at the time of Advaita. From that point of view, things were more degraded than now. Now, those who are not taking shelter of the expanding umbrella of Lord Chaitanya's Golden Age movement, then it's like worse and worse, just like more and more hellish and corrupt and hypocritical. At the same time, yeah, because of Advaitacharya's general Senapati, Srila Prabhupada, devotional service to Sri Krishna is more prominent than it was then. Now, where Advaitacharya was then, in Shantipur, Navadvipa, yeah, because there was a lot of Vedas and culture, compared to, as in the movie Gandhi, a reporter asked Gandhi, what do you think of American culture? And Gandhi responded, that would be nice. So we might say culture is degrading, and all of that at the same time. So Vedas and relatively more chastity and all of that. But what was going on in the name of the Vedas was almost all kind of like Mayavad, impersonal, like that. Whereas now, worldwide, the actual conclusion of the Vedas is Krishna consciousness is being practiced. So I just want to give that context. We'll read at least another few verses about this pastime of Advaitacharya invoking the descent, invoking the avatar, the golden avatar. And that's Lord Chaitanya. So just some here might be somewhat new to Sri-Caitanya-caritamrta, to this revealed literature. Okay, so all right, so it's 62 chapters in 3 divisions. Right, it's like Srimad Bhagavatam has 12 cantos. So Sri-Caitanya-caritamrta has 3 divisions: the Adi-lila, Adi beginning, the Madhya-lila middle, Ancha-lila the final pastimes. So and just like Bhagavad Gita has its 4 seed verses in chapter 10, and Srimad Bhagavatam has its 4 seed verses in chapter 9 of Canto 2. We might say the seed verses of the Sri-Caitanya-caritamrta are the first 14 verses of the first chapter. The first 14 verses of the first chapter. It's like the seed verses. And again, early this morning before japa. So of those 14 verses, 2 verses speak specifically about Advaitacharya. And we read them this morning. That's verses 12 and 13. So the first 14 verses are the seed verses. And then the next 12 chapters, the first 12 chapters, expand on the philosophy and the conceptual foundation of those first 14 verses, just if we get the context. Then right before we kind of started, right before we read this verse, we recited some mantras. 3 of the mantras we recited were text 15, 16, and 17 from the first chapter of Adi-lila. And that's Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami invoking the blessings and presence of the 3 main presiding deities of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Radha Madan Mohan, that's the deity about the Sambandha, our essential relationship as servants of Krishna. Sri Radha Govinda, who sit upon the fulgent throne, and that's the deity of Abhideya, the activities, the rasas in Rasa Sindhu, the ocean of rasas. Radha Govinda represents, or embodies. That's the act. So okay. Oh, we understand I'm spirit soul. I'm a servant of the Supreme Spirits, servant of super consciousness, Supreme Personality of Godhead. So what are those activities? That's the different types of relationships. And then the third deity, Radha Gopinath, Shri Radha Gopinath. And so so if I'm surrendered, if I'm engaged in that Abhidaya, if I'm engaged in those activities, what's the result? What's the fruit? The prayojana. The prayojana. And Shri Radha, that's the ecstatic love of God. That's Shri Radha Gopinath embodies that. Okay. And then the rest of the book, and the rest of the 50 chapters expand on the pastimes and the philosophy of those first 12 chapters, which expand from the first 14 verses. Not just some context here. I'll read a few more verses. Text 97. Keha pape, keha punye, kare vishaya boga, bhakti ganda nahi, yate yaya bhava roga. Everyone was engaged in material enjoyment, whether sinfully or virtuously. No one was interested in the transcendental service of the Lord, which can give total relief from the repetition of birth and death. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Advaita saw the entire world to be engaged in activities of material piety and impiety without a trace of devotional service or Krishna consciousness anywhere. The fact is that in this material world, there is no scarcity of anything except Krishna consciousness. I'll read that sentence again. The fact is that in this material world, there is no scarcity of anything except Krishna consciousness. Gets to the essence of be, do, have. Prabhupada quotes his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta often. Just that. There's nothing lacking in the world other than Krishna consciousness. And we can endeavor for the solution, and that solution, to the extent that we're alienated from deepening our true spiritual life, our Krishna consciousness, it's going to be Maya Sukhaya. It's going to be the illusion of happiness. It's going to be chasing the mirage. And of course, by cultivating the core of our being and the soul of our soul, and that essential relationship, Krishna consciousness, yeah, then there is doing and having, and it flows with inspiration from the core of our being that is richly fulfilled. Material necessities are supplied by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. We sometimes feel scarcity because of our mismanagement. But the real problem is that people are out of touch with Krishna consciousness. It's like a vernacular saying, out of touch. You're out of touch. But the real problem is that people are out of touch with Krishna consciousness. Everyone is engaged in material sense gratification, but people have no plan for making an ultimate solution to their real problems, namely birth, disease, old age, and death. These four material miseries are called bhava roga, or material diseases. They can be cured only by Krishna consciousness. Therefore, Krishna consciousness is the greatest benediction for human society. So Prabhupada, representing Sri Advaita, representing all the acharyas, the Vedas, he often emphasizes this point. We got also where we can't make lists of our problems. Make lists of our problems. But like these are the pillars of all problems. These are the foundational problems: birth, death, old age, disease. Because we don't want them. We don't want. Even someone says, "No, I accept my death." This and that. Okay. No, but if someone attacks us, we're going to fight back, or we're going to run away because we don't want to die. And that's natural, because the nature of the self is to be deathless. The nature of the self is to be deathless. And so, and Prabhupada often says, so we don't need to accept this. We don't need to accept this. And so much of life is, is running away from that reality. We're going to die and we don't want to. The death rate, according to research, remains steady at 100%. based on the studies I've seen, maybe there's some more up-to-date research. Steady at 100%, and we don't want it. We don't want it. Okay. And okay, but this body dies and get another body. I mean, and we can deconstruct it more and more. This body dies in the sense that it's not technically true. Technically, body's already dead. Oh, that's depressing. Sorry. Just like the car we're driving, maybe from an alien from another planet. Oh, these Mercedes and Chevrolets and Renaults, they're alive. No, they just appear alive because the driver's inside. So the body's made of dead stuff, but it appears alive because we're inside. The disease, right? So this is part of the context. We talk a lot about the material context, birth, death, old age, disease. Within those pillars, there's misery is coming from our own mind and body. Misery is coming from our propensity to cheat and for others to cheat on us. Eating, sleeping, mating, defending, limitations, like that. Okay, so yeah, not that we shouldn't attempt to alleviate and mitigate and reduce the suffering, sure. But that's what conditioned life means. We're accepting something as illusion. We're accepting something as reality that's illusion. Because sure, continue to do your research, do the research in the laboratories to try to cure diseases. And they've cured diseases, medical science has advanced so much. So now there's hardly any suffering from disease. Hard to find, right?
No pandemic at all.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's it. It's part of the context. Part of the context. So Prabhupada's stressing the real Acharya is like that their presence, their teachings, their vibration helps to liberate us from the cycle of birth, death, old age, disease. Not just to figuratively rearrange the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. The ship's going down. Okay, so that's real spiritual guidance. Okay, so that's Advaita Acharya. He's Advaita because he's one with Krishna. And he's different. He's Acharya because out of compassion, he's calling Lord Chaitanya and giving us this most sublime process of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Text 90. Lokagati Dekyacharya Karunaridaya Vichara Karina Lokera Kwaiche Hitahaya. Seeing the activities of the world, the Acharya felt compassion and began to ponder how he could act for the people's benefit. Apane Sri Krishna Yadi Karina Avatar, Apane Achari Bhakti Karina Prachar. If Sri Krishna were to appear as an incarnation, he himself could preach devotion by his personal example. Namavinu Kali Kale Dharma Nahi Ara Kali Kale Kwaiche Haive Krishna Avatar. In this age of Kali, there is no religion other than the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. But how in this age will the Lord appear as an incarnation? Shruta Bhave Kariba Krishna Aradhana Nirantara Sadainye Kariba Nivedana. I shall worship Krishna in a purified state of mind. I shall constantly petition him in humbleness. A few years ago, I was driving, I saw a church in Gainesville had on their outside board and had these quotes sometimes. The quote was, I think by Lord Alfred Tennyson, British poet. Like, more is wrought by prayer than the world knows. Yeah. So that's what we get. We're here in Alachua County, Florida, because Advaita Acharya prayed. That's why we're here. I shall worship Krishna in a purified state of mind. I shall constantly petition him in humbleness. Anya Krishnare Karon Kirtana Sanchara Tabese Advaitanama Sapala Amara My name, Advaita, will be fitting if I am able to induce Krishna to inaugurate the movement of the chanting of the holy name. Krishna Vasha Karivena Kumaradane Vicharite Ekashloka Oila Tanramane. While he was thinking about how to propitiate Krishna by worship, the following verse came to his mind. This is a verse from the Bhattamiya Tantra. Tulasi dalamantrena jalasya chulukena va vikrinite svam atmanam bhaktebhyo bhaktavatsala. Sri Krishna, who is very affectionate towards his devotees, sells himself to a devotee who offers merely a tulasi leaf and a palmful of water. So that verse appeared to him in that clear intention state to invoke the descent of Lord Krishna, Lord Chaitanya-caritamrta. Lokarta charya karena vicharan Krishna ke tulasi jala deya jan tararina shodhite Krishna karena chintana jala tulasira sama kichu gare nahidana. Advaita considered the meaning of the verse in this way. Not finding any way to repay the debt he owes to one who offers him a tulasi leaf and water, Lord Krishna thinks, there is no wealth in my possession that is equal to a tulasi leaf and water. Tabeatma vechikare rinera shodhana eta bhavyacharya karena aradhana. Thus the Lord liquidates the debt by offering his own self to the devotee. Considering this, the Acharya began worshipping the Lord. I'll read Srila Prabhupada's purport to that. It's text 107 here in chapter 3 of Adi-lila. Through devotional service, one can easily please Lord Krishna with a leaf of the tulasi plant and a little water. Simple and sweet. Through devotional service, one can easily please Lord Krishna with a leaf of the tulasi plant and a little water. I remember reading a letter from Prabhupada, going through his letters. And he was writing to disciples about major projects, management, and this plan, and all the World Harinam and like that, and all like that. And then so Prabhupada's guiding them like that. And at one point in the letter, he goes, and anyhow, what can we do really? He goes, just chant and be happy. So like, he's not minimizing, no, like do big things for Lord Chaitanya's movement and at the same time, and what can we do really? Just chant attentively, offer tulasi leaves. Both mentalities are vital. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or some water, patram pushpam palam tvayam, when offered with devotion, very much pleases him. He universally accepts the services of his devotees. Even the poorest of devotees in any part of the world can secure a small flower, fruit, or leaf, and a little water. And if these offerings, and especially tulasi leaves and Ganges water, are offered to Krishna with devotion, he is very satisfied. It is said that Krishna is so pleased by such devotional service that he offers himself to his devotee in exchange for it. Srila Advaita knew this fact, and therefore he decided to call for the personality of Godhead Krishna to descend by worshiping the Lord with tulasi leaves and the water of the Ganges. I'm reminded of the verse in the second chapter of the first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. Svaipum sambhavo dharmo yato bhaktirat hopsyaje aitupya pratiyata yatma suprasidati. That all occupational duties, whatever we're engaged in, is meant for inspiring devotional service to the transcendent Lord, Vasudev Sri Krishna. And such service is completely satisfying when it's unmotivated and uninterrupted. This hetu means reason, meaning that devotional service, nothing material can get in the way. It's going to be discouraging in a sense because it torpedoes all the excuses. Of course, I want to engage in service, but first I need to invest here, and therefore I need to take care of this health situation, and I need to, well, there's some stuff with my family, but after that's handled, it's me in devotional service, you'll see. But that verse is like, no, it's not dependent on one's education level, one's financial level, one's health condition. If we're sincere, nothing can get in the way of engaging in devotional service. And this is just one example of how it's very simple. Even there's examples, we discussed in some recent classes. Even if one doesn't even have any externals, Krishna is so pleased if with our mind. Vasudeva offered so much to Krishna's mind. There's the Brahman who offered sweet rice in his mind. But it's not like, oh, okay, yes, I'll just kind of like take a nap and offer in my mind. No, the idea is to give everything we have, 100%. And then if there's service we really like to do, but right now the externals aren't there, with intent, with our mind, to engage in them. So the good news about that is that's the bliss of the soul, to engage in this bhakti. And the good news is nothing material can get in the way. There's really no excuses. There's really no excuses. So it could be good news or bad news, depending how attached we are to our victimi mentality. Text 108. Ganga Jala Talasi Manjari Anukshana Krishna Pada Padma Bhavi Kare Samarpana. Thinking of the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, he constantly offered tulasi buds in water from the Ganges. Krishna Ravana Kare Karya Hunkar Emate Krishna Kaila Avatar. He appealed to Sri Krishna with loud calls and thus made it possible for Krishna to appear. Chaitanya avatare e mukya hetu bhaktera ichaya avatare dharma setu. Therefore, the principal reason for Sri Chaitanya's descent is this appeal by Advaita Acharya. The Lord, the protector of religion, appears by the desire of his devotee. Yeah. So in this section, these are the introductory chapters of Chaitanya-caritamrta. So there's, in this section, really there's 5 reasons given. And each reason can be seen as the reason. And what's called external reasons, Lord Chaitanya appears to please his devotees, like Srila Haridas Thakur, Sri Vaitacharya, to please his devotees. And he appears also an external reason. He appears to share Harinam Sankirtan, Krishna Varnam Tisha Krishnam Sangupang Resta Parshram Nige Sankirtana Puri Janti Sume Dasa. He appears with his associates like Advaita Acharya and Lord Nityananda, just like the picture right there up there on that wall, like to give Sankirtan, to give this Yuga Dharma chanting Hare Krishna. And then there are internal reasons like he wants to have some taste, some understanding of the quality and essence of the love of Srimati Radharani. He wants to have a taste because he understands that Krishna is like supremely blissful. And he gets that Srimati Radharani is more blissful. So he wants a taste of that. And then a third internal reason is he can see that Srimati Radharani is really attracted to him. And he wants to see what is it about him that's so attractive. So that's another reason for his appearance as Lord Chaitanya. Yes. Okay, so thinking of the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, he constantly offered tulasi buds in water from the Ganges. Text 109. Krishna Rahavana Kare Karya Hunkar Emate Krishnare Kaila Avatar. He appealed to Sri Krishna with loud calls and thus made it possible for Krishna to appear. So we get, there's nothing casual here. Nothing casual here. He's giving 100% from the depths of his being, crying out of compassion. and love. Chaitanya avatare mukya hetu bhaktira ichaya avatare dharma setu. Therefore, the principal reason for Sri Chaitanya's descent is this appeal by Advaita Acharya. The Lord, the protector of religion, appears by the desire of his devotee. Next is a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 9, Text 11. Tvam bhakti yoga paribhavita Tvam bhakti yoga paribhavita saroja ase shute kshita pato nanonata pumsam yad yadiyata urugaya vibhavayanti tattad vapu pranayase sadanugrahaya. Oh my Lord, you always dwell in the vision and hearing of your pure devotees. You also live in their lotus-like hearts, which are purified by devotional service. O my Lord, who are glorified by exalted prayers, you show special favor to your devotees by manifesting yourself in the eternal forms in which they welcome you. Spoken by Lord Brahman. Text 112. Shlokera artakai sankshepera sara bhaktera ichaya krishnera sarva avatara. The essence of the meaning to this verse is that Lord Krishna appears in all his innumerable eternal forms because of the desires of his pure devotees. Chaturta shlokera arta hoila sunishchite avatirna hoila gora prema prakashite. Thus I have surely determined the meaning of the fourth verse. Lord Gauranga, Lord Chaitanya, appeared as an incarnation to preach unalloyed love of God. So when he says he's delineating the essential meaning of the fourth verse, he's referring to the fourth of the seed verses. That's the fourth verse of chapter 1 of Adi-lila, which we read this morning. I'll read that fourth verse. The fourth verse is Narpita charim shirat karunaya bhatirna kalal samarpayitum munato jvala rasam Svabhakti Shriyam Hari Bharata Sundara Duti Kadamba Sandipita Sadaridaya Kandare Spuratu Va Sachinandan. May that Lord, who is known as the son of Srimati Sachidevi, be transcendently situated in the innermost chambers of your heart. Resplendent with the radiance of molten gold, he has appeared in the age of Kali by his causeless mercy to bestow what no incarnation ever offered before, the most sublime and radiant spiritual knowledge of the mellow taste of his service. So this third chapter expands on the meaning of that fourth verse. And this is the final verse of this chapter, chapter 3, text 114. Shri Rupa Raghunatha Padaya Chaitanya-caritamrta Kahe Krishna Das. Praying at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath, always desiring their mercy. I, Krishna Das, narrate Sri-Caitanya-caritamrta, following in their footsteps. Hare Krishna. Sri-Caitanya-caritamrta ki jai. Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami ki jai. Sri Advaita Acharya ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. So I welcome at this time if anyone would like to share any comments, realizations, ask any questions. If anyone would like to.
I was thinking like the description of Sri Advaita's thought process.
Yeah.
And his own dialogue with himself. And
yes.
And all that, like Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he came so late, and then he wrote based on like those two
the journals.
The journal. So it's really revealing to think of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami down the road.
Yeah.
Like really almost 2 generations down on Advaita Acharya at that time, that he had all those revelations. And like That's what we were speaking about yesterday, but it's not like you read a book about Advaita Acharya's mind in approaching, it's something I was thinking about.
Yeah, so you're commenting on, we get a glimpse, we get an entrance into the inner conversation of Advaita Acharya in this chapter, given to us by Srila Krishnadas Goswami. And of course, Krishnadas Goswami, Kaviraj Goswami had access to the Kadaches, the diaries of Raghunath Das Goswami and Sri-Damodar Goswami. And my understanding is there's, like Prabhupada uses the term in relation to Sanjaya and Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada uses the term mystic television. Very cool term. Right? Prabhupada's writing in the 60s, and the television was just now becoming popular. So mystic television, and a metaphor we can relate to. So we trust a personality like Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. He's got some mystic television going on.
Yeah, and later on we speak about this connection with Lord Nityananda.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what was coming for me, like when you were reading. I said, wow, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is speaking to us about the internet dialogue of Advaita Acharya. How wonderful is that?
Hare Krishna. A week from today is the appearance day of Nityananda. Hare Krishna.
There was one verse from you read, thank you so much for a good class, in which it said that the Lord gives himself as a liquidation of his debt.
Yeah.
And that was very interesting for me, the idea that the Lord is carrying debt based on devotees, based on their bhakti, and he's unable to pay the debt, so he gives himself to the devotees. It's a very interesting concept that God, you have the debt, the idea that we have, and it's a debt of love.
Yeah.
And God, the omniscient, the omnipotent, is everything. And he's still unable to pay the debt, so he gives himself away.
That's touching your heart. That's touching your heart. Thanks for sharing that, Sindhu. Yesterday in class, Malini alluded to the pastime of the Brahman in South India, described in Chaitanya-caritamrta. What you shared reminds me of that pastime. He was a Brahmin, but he was apparently illiterate. And so he was sitting there in the village. He had Bhagavad Gita, turn the pages, and the villagers are laughing at him because they're mocking him, like, can't even read. So then Lord Chaitanya comes through that village, and he goes to the Brahmin. And at first the Brahmin thinks that this Chaitanya sannyasi, you're also mocking me. And no, Chaitanya says, well, what are you doing? I really want to understand. And so he goes, well, my guru, my spiritual master, he instructed me to read Bhagavad Gita every day. So I turn the pages, but I'm illiterate, so I can't read, but I'm following the order of my spiritual master. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, well, okay, but you're crying. How come you're crying? You can't read, how come you're crying? So he said, well, on the cover, there's this picture, and this part reminded me of your sharing it. There's this picture of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's all powerful, omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. And he's driving his friend Arjuna's chariot. Like he feels such a debt of love. And so just thinking of Krishna and Arjuna and what Krishna is doing, it just moves me to tears. And Lord Chaitanya said, you are the real knower of Bhagavad Gita. You are the real knower of Bhagavad Gita. Thanks for sharing. I feel your heart in your sharing. All right. Krishna. Anandini.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Just to give context, Anandini sitting there in Wheeler, Switzerland, visiting us from Switzerland.
Yes, two things that moved me and I reflected on. One, like you started with sharing that this is it's a very emotional expression of Sri Advaita, praying Lord Krishna to appear, not for himself, not even for himself, but for the whole world. And I was reflecting on how there's, in coaching or in therapy, we speak about compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
So there's the suffering when I as a therapist or coach, I start to suffer and burn out because I feel the suffering of others, which is, like unhealthy. And here's Sri Advaita, an example of he's not going to compassion fatigue. Like he's very powerful in his compassion and feeling the suffering for others. So that was interesting for me to reflect on. And a question I have, maybe you could speak something about it, is that so Sri Advaita he's like God, a different form of God, and Lord Chaitanya, he's God, and Lord Nityananda, it's a form of God or expansion of God. So all these personalities that are here to inspire us, that's what I understand. They're here to inspire us in devotion and to show us an example of how to give our lives to God. They are all God themselves. And my mind can go to, oh, it's easy for them, they're God. So what hope is there for me? I'm not God.
Okay.
So,
Yes. Thanks for your sharing. Thank you, Anandini. Hare Krishna. Well, first I'll just what's happening for me in relation to compassion fatigue. I think that's a great point you bring out in regard here. Yeah, Advaita, Prahlad Maharaj, or Vasudeva, they're not suffering from compassion fatigue. And that just in a very grounded, practical way, that's a way that can be a gauge, like a way we can assess for ourselves the extent to which our giving and our service and our helping is material or spiritual. Right? Because the extent that I'm truly giving from a clean spiritual place, then my giving is energizing. And my giving is energizing and enthusing and inspiring and deepening my self-realization and my enthused connection to engage in more giving. The reward for service is more service. And and of course it's nice if there's reciprocation, like if people appreciate me for what I'm giving, that's nice. At the same time, we all know sometimes that's there and sometimes not. Sometimes, as it is said, no good deed goes unpunished. We've all experienced that one. We've also probably punished others for their good deeds too in material life. And so it's nice when there is reciprocation of appreciation and affection, and sometimes it's not there. So like I know if I'm given from a clean place, a truly spiritual place, then whatever the reciprocation or not, I'm deepened in my enthusiasm. And to the extent that I'm like depleted or becoming resentful or feeling empty or getting into a martyr thing, I give so much, but you, then I know I'm not coming from a clean place. And it might be, maybe others are not appreciating properly. I mean, they could have their stuff, but I'm not coming from a clean place. And I got some other motivations going on, motivation to be adored or to be distinguished or to be like that. Like there's something not in balance here. I'm not meeting myself where I'm at, doing the martyr thing, not Yeah, like that. So thanks for relating that. Yeah, Advaita. See, as the pastimes go on, he just deepens his enthusiasm on the transcendental platform for ecstasy, sharing ecstasy. And then, yeah, the other question, I don't know if I have, any meaningful realizations for your question. I think it's a very fine question. So, okay, so Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, and Sri Advaita, they are, they're all God. They're all Vishnu Tattva, and all in the role of devotees of God. So it's a special type of incarnation, a Bhakta avatar. All three of them, they're in the role, they're God in the role of here's how to do it, right? Like Krishna closes Bhagavad Gita, Saradaman Priyagya Mame Kam Sharanam Vraja Am Tam Sarva Papebhyo Moksha Ishami Mashucha. Abandon all yoga, abandon all varieties of religion. Of course, all those processes can have their place, but ultimately they're meant to bring us to just surrender to me. Okay. Then he appears about 4,500 years later as Sri-Caitanya-caritamrta and Lord Nityananda and Sri Advaita to show us, okay, here's how to do it. Here's how to do it. Prabhupada sometimes gives the example. Actually, there's that well-known picture of Prabhupada in the Dallas Gurukul, maybe around 73 or something, showing a student how to write the Sanskrit letters, and he's holding the student's hand. That student is Dwarkadish Das, graduate of the Sappho Foundational Advanced Course. Darwin is his first name. Yeah, he's a graduate, Foundational Advanced. I think he lives in Texas now. We're in touch with him occasionally. The past year I've had some correspondence. And so Prabhupada gives the example that so the teacher will take the student's hand. Here's how you write A, B, right? Now the teacher doesn't need to go slow, but the teacher, here's how you do it. So he said, that's like Lord Chaitanya's incarnation. That's Advaita. Here's how you do that. Pure devotional surrender. Okay, then well, they're God. They're like transcendental even to the infallible. Okay, so how does that relate to me? So I can relate to that. Right. And yes, thanks for that, Anand. So yes. Well, okay, so then we do have Anand, would you say that part of clean giving is that we give for their God realization, or for their and not for them? Yeah, okay. My answer, my realization of that is yes, because to the extent that we're serving someone materially, we can't be completely clean. We're not going to be in that pure sattvic place. We're serving someone materially. We got some material motivations going on. That's the instance of demigod worship. So really, that full clean giving can only be when our sound vibration is completely non-different from Advaita. Otherwise, we're going to have some martyr energy, depletion energy going on. Because that's why Jantividi Purvaka, Prabhupada describes about demigod worship. I have bhakti for Shiva. I have bhakti for the Ashvini, for Indra. Of course, it's another. Someone could have bhakti for Shiva as the head of a sampradaya, but to Shiva without Vaishnavanamrita Sabhu. No, it's always a business. In any material giving, it's always a business. I got some strings attached, subtle or gross. Right? I need to be needed. So are you needing me yet? It's always some strings attached. And so the material strings are not attached only when we're actually giving genuine, when we're giving genuine spiritual life, authorized transcendental transformational sound vibration. Yeah, otherwise we're going to have some strings attached. Yes, Rasas.
In response to that question, Prabhu, said what is the hope for us? Because they are all gods and representative of gods and part and parcels of gods and friendly portion of gods.
Yeah.
And the pastime of Jagai Bhavani comes to my mind.
Okay. Yeah.
That Nityananda Prabhu, when he was, him and Haridas Thakur would go on the streets, and Nityananda Prabhu would think that who is the most sinful person that I can give Harinam to.
Yeah.
So that way the example can be established that if the most sinful person can get liberated by Lord Chaitanya's mercy, then there is some hope for us. And he does that. He goes to Jagai Madhai's house and knocks and he shouts that Hari Bolo, Hari Bolo. And they don't appreciate it. Madhai takes a broken shard and breaks it in Nityananda Prabhu's head. And blood is gushing out. And then Haridas Thakur runs to Mahaprabhu. Says that Nitai got hit. And then Lord Chaitanya invokes the Sudarshan Chakra. He says, that's it, I'm going to kill these rascals.
Yeah.
And Nityananda said, no, Prabhu, if you, all of them are like this, if this entire Kaliyuga, everyone is Jagai Mata in their hearts in some capacity. So if you kill them, then what hope will remain for others? So you have to forgive them. And so he forgives them, and then he gives them Harinam, and then they get transformed, their heart gets transformed. Then Jagai Mata for years, then they would live at the banks of Ganges and chanting the holy name, repenting, asking for forgiveness. So that comes to my mind that yes, there is hope for us because the most sinful people in the world were transformed through Lord Chaitanya's mercy.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Rasa Sindhu Prabhu. And I see that as a perfect example in response to Anandini's question. Thanks very much for invoking that. No.
I was thinking of that, like no hope. If those great personalities show us example, but it's easy for them, Anandini was saying, it's easy for them, they are God. So what's the big deal? Like it's easy for them, but for us to be compassionate and to follow, like yesterday in the verse also, there was, it's a duty. It's a duty of one who have received any type of devotional, level to give it to others. But what's the hope for us? And I was thinking like, there is a reverse also. At least for the pastime of Lord Chaitanya, I found the reverse is there too.
Yes.
And for me, the reverse is like, if God have his sublime, most elevated pleasure by going in the street chanting Hare Krishna and going door to door, like Lord Nityananda and Haridas Thakur, if God has sublime pleasure and he fall in ecstasy, like by eating prashadam and dancing at the Ratha Yatra. So there is so much hope for us because, of course, the pastime of Vrindavan are not accessible to us. Otherwise, we become sahajas. They're not accessible. And the Lord in the Chaitanya-caritamrta, little letters on that, he said, like, it's almost like, oh, I forgot. I forgot it. They cannot, they can understand my relationship with my eternal devotees in Vrindavan, but I didn't show them how. And the pastime of Lord Chaitanya, they are completely accessible for us. And in fact, we are in the pastime right now of Lord Chaitanya. And we can enjoy the same way that he shows how to enjoy. And Lord Nityananda and Advaita Acharya, they take the role of devotees and they say, you can do that. And you can fully enjoy the same level that I enjoy. And if it's good enough for God to enjoy in that way, then it's good enough for us. So it's like the reverse.
I appreciate that. Yeah. That's what Krishna likes to do when he comes as Lord Chaitanya. Harinam in the street. We get to do that. Actually, and we won't get to it today, or at least not this morning. Another wonderful pastime with Sri-Advaita Acharya, lots of prasadam pastimes. So serving and consuming prasadam.
And God enjoy. And he enjoy in a way we can enjoy that too. So
here's how to do it.
Yeah, how to do it. And if it's good for me, it should be good for you too.
Thank you, Mother Malani. Tamal.
It's just a little bit of a different subject. That's okay. But
I wonder how you might respond. Yeah, just to provoke my own learning. Sri-Advaita Charya, Advaita means non-different. Advaita, not divided. But it's very interesting that like who he is, there's very divided opinion about that. Like his name, his identity is Advaita.
Yeah.
But in these early chapters of the Chaitanya-caritamrta, Kaviraj Goswami is explaining very detailed, specifically that he's Mahavishnu.
Yeah.
Mahavishnu avatar. And then at the end of every chapter, he's saying, I'm the follower of Rupa and Raghunath.
Yes.
But Rupa Goswami and people like Kavi Karnapur, who sucked the toe of Lord Chaitanya, the people who actually saw Lord Chaitanya in the Advaita Charya, they say that he's actually Shiva.
Okay. Yeah.
So sometimes a tradition or a person may have these dichotomies appear. Some people say that we were with Krishna and we fell. And they say, well, Prabhupada says, even in Vaikuntha, even the leaves don't fall. So there are these different statements sometimes that seem completely Vaita,
Yes.
completely impossible to reconcile. And how do we attain like a coherent vision of life and of like participation in our parampara's vision when things like that happen? The most authorized biography of Lord Chaitanya is Chaitanya-caritamrta, but Kaviraj Goswami wasn't there. He heard, but it's accepted. Perfect. He didn't know Advaita Charya, but he heard from these people, but those people say something different about Advaita Charya. How does that happen that he has this very elaborate vision of Advaita Charya as Mahavishnu, but his own gurus say that he's Shiva? How do we reconcile this Dvaita that's apparently inside of any religious tradition, but in our tradition, we're most interested to have like a coherent, integrated vision of life. And maybe there's some kind of medicine or cure for this false dichotomy in Advaita Charya's mercy in his Kirtan somehow, because his name is like not divided. His name isn't oneness, his name is not divided.
Yes.
There's not a conflict here. There's two things, but they're not in conflict. So how do we get to that Advaita consciousness?
Thanks for your sharing and question, Tamal. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you, Srila Prabhupada. That's my answer. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada, and that's what it means. That so that we approach understanding through the current link to the parampara, through the direct link to the parampara. And so, like all of you shared, that's there in Prabhupada's books. And so by serving Srila Prabhupada's mission, then Prabhupada is present with us. Prabhupada is present with us. And we get realizations of these, apparent contradictions of these realms that are inconceivable. Inconceivable, of course, doesn't mean we can't understand. How can we understand? Not by mundane empiricism. Not by mundane empiricism. Like even in ordinary science, it's accepted. Like there are certain realities, truths that are accepted, even though they're inconceivable to the mundane mind, intelligence, and senses. Just like the square root of -1. It's accepted. It's not even, they're called imaginary numbers. But if like there are physical formulas that represent nature that include like the square root of the imaginary numbers, which means like nature works with those things and it's completely inconceivable. Or what's the width? What are the dimensions of a point? Infinitesimal, 0. Now, a line, whether it's a line of an inch or a million miles, is made up of infinite numbers of points. So if you get infinite number times 0, you still have 0. But so a line of a finite distance is made of, there's so many things like that. So that's accepted. So inconceivable doesn't mean we can't understand. Now, in transcendental manners, the way to understand is through bhakti. Through bhakti, given through our current link to the Parampara. So that's why, like myself, if not guided by Srila Prabhupada, I could go to the commentaries of Jiva Goswami. I can go to the commentaries of Narahari Sarkar and the songs of Chandidas. And if not seeing through the pure lenses of Srila Prabhupada, I can even go to some personal growth book or whatever. And if not seeing through the pure lenses of Srila Prabhupada, then I'll get confused. And even though transcendental sound vibration will probably be like a detriment to my spiritual life. What's that?
You can get lost.
I get lost. I probably would get lost. And I do go to so many places, reading Sandarbhas, this and that, and like that, and reading so many books. I have a library of books that are not like from a conventional sense, Gaudiya, Sampradaya or Prabhupada. So I endeavor that wherever I go, seeing it through the lenses of Srila Prabhupada, through the pure, transparent lenses of Srila Prabhupada. And that means that each day I want to be more and more firmly fixed in Prabhupada's Siddhanta. So I'm talking about the general process. My general answer is thank you, Srila Prabhupada. Now, for each particular one, we can talk about, okay, because like, is Advaita Acharya Shiva, or is he the, or is he the material cause aspect of Mahavishnu? Decide, And so at the same time, I have maybe a drop of realism, like it doesn't need to be this or that. Right? It's a this and that. It's a this and that, just like we hear Haridas Thakur. He's an incarnation of Lord Brahman and Prahlad, and the mercy function of Prahlad Maharaj. So it doesn't make any sense. Is this or that? And then just like I don't understand these things, but I have more realization about those things than I did 10 years ago or 40 years ago. And that's through following Srila Prabhupada, the son that he gave us, and reading Prabhupada's books and endeavoring with some sincerity to serve Prabhupada's mission. Then we get more and more realization about the square root of negative one. I appreciate your questions. Rasa.
3 things come to my mind. I think that was, as you alluded to the idea of science, that what is a point and then how can set of points form a line?
Yeah.
In Greek philosophy, there is the idea of Zeno and his paradox. And he tells somebody that to reach a distance, let's say I have to reach that end there, I have to walk half the distance. Now to walk half the distance, I have to walk half of that. To walk half of that, I have to walk half of that. So if I do all of these distances, I will never reach that end point, right? So that's the idea of it's being inconceivable. And that links to the idea of it's achintya bheda vedtattva, that we had these philosophies of Dvaitavad. First Advaita came, then Madhvacharya gave the Dvaitavad, then Ramanuja gave Vishishta, and then finally Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, and then he reconciled it all, and he told achintya bheda vedtattva, that it's achintya, it's inconceivable, it's bheda, there is difference, it's abheda, it's not different. So we have those contradictions existing together in one reality. There's another verse, I can't remember that, I think it's from Padma Purana, that the Lord is taller than the tallest, at the same time he's smaller than the smallest, he's older than the oldest, and he's younger than the youngest. So we see all these contradictions, they exist from a material perspective. We try to see the Lord, because we have conception of the world limited by length, time, charge, angular momentum. If we think in these terms, then the conception of Lord is beyond what we can understand. But from a spiritual perspective, when we see that all reality is absolute, and Krishna is simultaneously the young and the oldest, and really these conceptions, they don't apply. That's when we realize that, okay, it's an absolute reality, and in absolute reality, absolute things are possible, which may not make sense from a material perspective. That how is Advaita Acharya puts Sadashiva? and Mahavishnu. But if you think from an absolute perspective that they're representing the Tattva, both Sadashiva comes from Mahavishnu, which comes from the Chaturvya forms of the Lord. So ultimately, from a Tattvic perspective, it is the same Tattva that we are looking at, but it's manifesting different aspects, and hence we categorize them into different categories. So kind of reconciliation of that paradox is, from a material perspective, yes, it's a paradox, but from an absolute perspective, it's the absolute reality. It's true, yes.
Yes. Thanks very much for that. Thanks very much for that. Good. And so, yeah, and so like to the extent that I am in material perspective, then I can blissfully accept I'm not going to get all of this, and then it doesn't need to be a problem. It just like Bhagavatam starts Dharma Pojita Kochacha Pramani Matsaranam Tatam Nejam Atvastu Bastu Tabo Shiva. Bhagavatam starts like, this literature is for those who are completely non-envious. So when I said just close the book, okay, I guess not for me. No, we're not supposed to. So like, no, we're supposed to read because we get purified by reading. And I can accept, like, there's going to be things here like I'm not going to get. They're going to be apparently contradictory.
Well,
and
most of it will not get, really.
Yeah. There's going to be big. There's going to be like huge chunks, maybe 99.9%. Whatever I get or not get, it's purifying, because it's for those completely free from envy. So yeah, and then as we serve, we get more and more purified, and then we enter into that absolute perspective, and then and I can say if I look, I know when I first gave some commitment to practice this process of bhakti yoga, like 1983, 1984, and then after I committed, then I was really tormented by doubts for several years. I would read something in Prabhupada's book, what says this here and that there? I was tormented by doubt. It was a real challenge. And I can say that I have hundreds of examples where, where sometimes just I would offer dandavats to Srila Prabhupada with some heartfelt sincerity. And we get up from dandavats and something that was a hopeless contradiction, the dots connected. And then other times just by going out on book distribution, giving books to the Muslims. That was my service at the time. Just by then so many resolutions from the relative material perspective would be resolved at a level of consciousness that I couldn't imagine 6 months before. I appreciate very much your response.
Just one more thing comes to my mind. The cat is both dead and alive. So nature gives the dual nature of light, right? We have inconceivable realities in this world also.
Yeah.
Whether light is particle, light is death, it's the cat death, is the cat alive.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, the cat's both dead and alive. Wait, is it a wave or a particle? Decide. Yeah. Garuda Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, good morning. I'm appreciating the class, and at the same time, I feel like a lot of the, I guess, just where the conversation's going, it's so far from where I'm at. I feel like this Krishna consciousness can be so like extensive and gratifying for the intellect, but I don't really identify as an intellect myself, and I can feel a lot of energy moving around in me just from this class. And what I wanted to connect with is I feel like I don't know if my power is going out. Am I still there? Oh yes, hi. I feel like what I'm really connecting with is and is one of my favorite things I meditate on with this practice is the story of the illiterate Brahman that you mentioned earlier. And I feel like I feel like this practice can feel intimidating to me because there's so much. It's like so extensive. And then when I first heard this kind of pastime story, I felt like, oh, like this is what I need. This is what I need. I need to know that it's not reliant on how much I really understand, but am I really connecting to the essence? Like Lord Chaitanya is like, here's someone who knows the Srimad Bhagavatam, someone who knows the Bhagavad Gita. And to me, that just, I feel so much hope there, because like, I feel like, well, that's it. Like if I can connect to that love, and without like my mind, because I feel like my mind mostly torments me more than I feel it serves me. So I guess I wanted to share that. I just really like, yeah, I feel like that's like saving grace for me, is that hearing that story and just meditating on that experience. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Garuda Prabhu. I'm moved by your sharing and how you're relating in your process of Krishna consciousness, bhakti yoga, to that historical pastime of Lord Chaitanya and the illiterate Brahmin who was the real knower of Bhagavad Gita from the deep soul-felt, heartfelt place. Thanks for your personal sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, I do have one. I know we're going over. We're not taking prashad, so we have some extra time.
Yeah, it's half day fast.
I just I heard this comment from a devotee that was really helpful for me. And actually, I think it lines up with Biju Have. He mentioned Biju Have in your class. And he was saying kind of like these topics, like how to understand. And he was saying, well, one approach maybe is more helpful is rather than just seeking to understand, seeking to develop the qualities to be able to understand. And so I thought that was perfectly be to have, like rather than like trying to do or have to realize, let me seek the qualities, let me be those qualities, develop those devotional qualities so that I'm able to understand. Just like just put energy there rather than like the debate.
Thanks for that. I find that profound. Simple and very sublime.
Pretty soothing.
And in that, well, like Gaurkishore Das Babaji, he's in our parampara. That's, a brilliant example, because his one disciple, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, was known as the walking encyclopedia and the scholarly and the greatest Vedic scholar of the age. And Gaurkishore Das Babaji was illiterate, couldn't sign his name. Maybe all he could do was sign his name. And Prabhupada emphasizes Gaurkishore Das Babaji, he knew all the philosophy. He had all the Vaishnava qualities that he could respond to anything. He could perfectly, but it wasn't for him. It wasn't from books. Thanks for sharing that, Bhakti and Bria.
I have a question to you about Ollie. You said something like Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, they help us relate with them, and then the Vrindavan pastimes like that we can't really relate with, and if we can, then it's Sahajya or something like that.
It's not about relating, it's about enacting. I can go in the street and do Sankirtan. I can raise my hand like Lord Chaitanya, exactly the same. It's like the Lord is enjoying a pastime that we can enjoy. We can go in the street, raise our hand, we can enjoy Prashadam, we can do everything. And if it's good enough for the Lord, that to really enjoy that, well, we can just look at it. I was just doing the reverse of Anandini. Like, it's great. Wow, it's easy. We can do that. Chant Hare Krishna and you read Bhagavatam. I can do that too. But like me going, in the middle of the night in the forest of Vrindavan to dance with Krishna, this is, Sajya. That's what I was sharing.
Okay, thank you. I thought you were saying relating, because I actually relate with Vrindavan pastimes more than.
No, I wasn't saying relating, it's enacting. Enacting, and the Lord is enacting pastimes. Amazingly, like Lord Chaitanya is enacting pastimes that are completely given to us if we choose to enact too. Of course, there is limitation. We are not going to go to his ecstatic pastime like Jagannath Puri, but most of his lives, we can, and that's really amazing. Often I think of that. If it's good enough for Krishna, yeah, I want to do that too. And I've observed that is manifesting in us, because we can. Yeah.
And you walk the talk. You do love going out in the street and chanting Hare Krishna.
Yeah, there's something special about doing that, and thinking that that's what God, Krishna, and Lord Chaitanya enjoy doing, and it's accessible for us. We can do that too. I was just thinking about Garuda's sharing about the Brahman, and what you shared earlier, and the key here, it seems, and the key to develop the qualities, Guru, because the Brahman, he said, my Guru told me he didn't tell him, oh, you need to understand.
Right.
You know, it's like if we try to understand, like, this is me, understanding, it's still false ego.
Yeah.
You know, like Garuda was saying. But the Brahman didn't think like, oh, I need to understand. He felt like, I need to follow the instruction of my spiritual master.
Yeah.
And then by following the instruction of his spiritual master and be dedicated to follow the instruction, even so materially, there was no way he could, and just taking the Bhagavad Gita every day, then he received the Vyagyan, then he received transcendental knowledge, then get all the help from the Guru.
That's the how-to, and how to develop the qualities. And we serve the mission and follow the guidance of the Guru, or currently to the Prabhupada.
And then everything else follow from that. And even if it doesn't follow from that, that's not the point anymore. Yeah, it's not.
It's not intrinsically about being self-absorbed. What qualities am I developing?
Yeah, how advanced I am.
Yeah. And it's like, like you said, materially it was impossible because they didn't know how to read. So similarly, if we're to the extent that we're sincerely, deeply surrendered to following Srila Prabhupada, we're going to get service that's going to be like, this is impossible. I don't know how to do this. To the extent that we're sincerely like, no, I really want to dedicate myself 110% to your mission, Prabhupada. So be careful.
What you ask for.
Right, no, because if we're sincere, then we'll get service where it's just like, I don't know how to, and even in personal growth, we often say clear intention often means, I don't know how this is going to happen. And it's going to happen.
Just to that last point, Prabhu, I think I remember the example of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, that Prabhupada said that he took away services, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj said that, I don't know, Prabhupada, what should I do? Maybe I should just go to China, Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, that's right, go to China. And he said, I was just joking. He said, no, you go to China. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj went to China and started the preaching there.
Yeah, very successful.
Very successful preaching. So really an impossible task. The other thing, based on the idea of Krishna's pastimes and Mahaprabhu's pastimes, there's an excellent purport. I have it in my phone, I'll share it here. By Srila Prabhupada in Bhagavatam, I think 2nd or 3rd canto, where he writes that these Bodhayantas Paraswaram, these discussions between the devotees, is equivalent to dancing with Krishna in Raja. He says that by discussing these pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, it's equivalent, and devotees don't differentiate between the two because it's the same experience of being with Krishna. Number 3, to Garuda Prabhu's point that he relates with the illiterate Brahmana, that instead of knowing everything and understanding everything, just crying his heart out in devotion. The example comes to my mind is of the husband of the gopis. There are all these Brahmanas who are doing these elaborate yagyas and elaborate ceremonies, and the simple gopis are just sitting at home, remembering Krishna and cooking for Krishna. And they are saying that we are invoking the Brahman, we are invoking the Supreme, and they are putting all the ceremonies. And the Supreme would come and he would eat. And at that same time, Krishna and Balaram walk over. And they said, can we get the laddu? Can we get? They're like, go away from here. We are trying to invoke the Supreme. This is meant for the Supreme. And then they let Krishna and Balaram go away. And then they go to gopis, and Krishna and Balaram are there with the gopis. Can we have something? And the gopis are cooking and feeding everything. And the Brahmana saying that, no, that's for the Supreme, that's not for these two boys. And so that's the example, that in the understanding, in the idea of doing the perfect yagya, doing the perfect way to give the oblation, the perfect fire, they forgot the perfection standing right there in front of them. So the idea that truly it's the heart which connects, and the mind can take us all ways, but gopis were leading their devotion with heart, and Brahmanas were between their mind. So that was a difference that came to me.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it's a pastime completely aligned with the themes of the illiterate Brahmin in response to the wives of the Brahmins, or the gopis, and yeah, and thanks for sharing that. Right. So the Brahmins of the ritual, they got the right intonation and inflection for all the mantras. And then the Bhagavan themselves come along and want a ladu, and like, scram, kid. I'm too busy doing spiritual stuff. And the wise of the Brahmins, like, Krishna and Balaram are hungry. Oh my God, what can we do? That's, yeah. So they didn't know shlokas. They were the real full realizers of God. Thanks for that. Sri-Caitanya-caritamrta ki, Sri-Advaita ki, Prabhupada ki, Hare Krishna.